Welcome in to a very special episode of the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm flanked by Mike Herndon over there and Zach Lyons over there, both who've been writing some terrific stuff at paulkuharsky.com. I hope you've been reading it. Brought to you by Zen Sports, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit, part of the 440 Sports Network. Thrilled to have you guys on such a mournful day as we learn of the passing of O.J. Simpson. It's a weird thing to talk about. I think you'll join me in not wishing death on anybody. But I've always had this conversation about people. I always wanted to run into an airport crowd mobbing O.J. Simpson, not to approach O.J. Simpson, but to approach the people approaching O.J. Simpson, to ask them what the hell they were doing and why they wanted a selfie with O.J. Simpson or an autograph, and to hound them. And you guys know me well enough. I think Zach might have approached it the same way. I don't know. I'll let you answer. But how would you react if you saw people post Nicole approaching O.J. Simpson after his freedom from his 9-year prison sentence, hero worshiping O.J. Simpson? And could you ever get your head around why people still found him to qualify in the celebrity basket?
I think it's weird because it was interesting when he died. My initial reaction was like, oh, damn shame. Because I mean, he did it. And I was thinking about, because I guess today, this year's the 20th anniversary of the Bronco chase and everything.
Only 20?
God, it feels like so much longer.
That's what I read. Yeah, because it was 94, right? Wasn't it 94?
30.
Or was it in the
30 then.
30.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Well, I guess that's 30. Sorry, my math is wrong. But I remember it was such a big deal, and in our house, we were glued to the TV in my parents' bedroom, and I can remember ordering Domino's and eating pizza, and then watching the chase, and then watching the trial. And the big thing is like, what I remember most about that time was Norm Macdonald and his weekend updates just destroying unrelentlessly O.J. Simpson, and it did get him fired, like you said. And I'm just like, you see NFL Network, ESPN, they're like, our story on the death of O.J. Simpson. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, okay, he's dead. I mean, he was in jail for the longest time. Like, is he really that big of a celebrity anymore as far as what he means to society, other than the fact that he's a known murderer? Like, I don't know. I would be like you. I don't think I would approach the crowd, but I would definitely be talking crap about the crowd to my wife or whoever I was traveling with.
He got John Starks off the hook for shooting so poorly during that series, I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was it game 7 where Starks was like 1 for 18? I don't remember which game it was.
Because they were like cutting into the actual broadcast of that game to bring you the chase and everything. And I'm kind of like Zach. I think I would just talk trash about the people who were coming up to him. But to me, it's just the society has like a celebrity sickness thing, where if you're famous, it doesn't matter what you're famous for. People want selfies and just want to show that they were with you or whatever. And it's a gross thing to me. And I don't fully understand it, but it's pretty prevalent, I think, at this point in our society.
I'm one of those people that's not like sentimental, so I don't get affected by celebrity deaths. I think Robin Williams, Chris Farley, Phil Hartman kind of like hit me hard. Taylor Hawkins hit me hard, but they're all for different reasons. But like, if it's tragic that people die. You don't, like you said, you don't want to wish death on anybody. But like, people who have done stupid things to get killed or die, or I don't find myself being very sympathetic or torn up about it to go on social media and post stuff, regardless of any celebrity status for the most part. I just kind of keep it to myself. It's
a whole different thing when people you grew up rooting for start dying. Yeah. You guys are younger. Wait till you get to that. Like Giorgio Canaglia, who played for the Cosmos when I was a kid and was one of my favorites with Greg Nettles. When he died, I was like, whoa, this is a weird thing to be old enough to have somebody I rooted for as a kid die like a natural old man death. That's another episode entirely. But you've got fun things ahead of you when you get older and you get to those points where you're like, yeah, these are benchmarks of aging. On to the things
that avoid gout. That's all I want to do. Avoid gout. I'm a big meat eater, so I'm very nervous.
I got a text message from somebody or a DM from somebody. I might have to make a public retraction on somebody that had genetic gout, not not overweight gout, and we'll move on. There's so much consensus in this draft from big draft media about what the top of this draft is going to look like regarding 3 or 4 quarterbacks, 3 receivers. Have we talked enough about being scared of this concept that things often do not go the way that we expect? Usually we throw wrenches into these scenarios and talk about them. We have not. I don't think the 3 of us have. I don't think the big draft complex has. What are our top scenarios that could conceivably blow that up?
I think for me, it's the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks not going as planned, because I do think that there's scenarios where maybe the Patriots decide there's too many holes in our roster. We're moving back. We're moving out. We're going to pick up a blue chip player somewhere along the way, and we'll just try to fix quarterback later. I could see the Patriots trading out, but then that team coming up would probably be coming up for a quarterback, right? So I think if the quarterback somehow, if the Drake May, doubt or whatever is real, if the JJ McCarthy stuff is being overblown, that maybe if only 2 quarterbacks go in the top 7, I think that might be the surprise that we could not be talking about right now.
I don't think we're talking enough about the Patriots taking Joe Alt. This is kind of playing off what you just said. I mean, they could also trade back, and that was in my notes as well. But their starting left tackle is Connor McDermott, and that's not good. And I remember when Elliott Wolf, I guess when they were going through the coaching process, the hiring process, general manager process, one of the earliest things that was talked about this front office for the Patriots was that Elliott Wolf loves Joe Alt, loves building up the trenches. They have a massive hole there. And to be honest, if they don't love quarterback 3, but they really love OT1, that makes, and they can't facilitate a trade back, because at that point, if they choose not to go to a quarterback and they are calling other teams saying, hey, we're not taking a quarterback. Do you want to trade back and come get one? These teams are like, well, I can kind of wait a little bit and pay less with another team, because who's going to want to trade up if they're not taking the quarterback? And it's just kind of playing that game. And I look at it like, if they take Joe Alt, that changes almost the entirety of how that top 10 plays out, who wants to move up, who will move up. It changes the whole outlook because it pushes quarterbacks down the board. And we have seen this happen routinely, that everybody pumps up all these quarterbacks, and we're supposed to get like 6 quarterbacks in the first round, or 5 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10, and then it never happens. So we'll see what it is this year, but I kind of get the sense, like, when people talk about, when scouts and coaches anonymously talk about JJ McCarthy, they rarely talk about what he does on the field. They talk about his attitude. They talk about what he has said to his teammates and how he's a great leader and all this kind of stuff. That just kind of makes me feel like they like his experience and they like his attitude, but they're not sold on the arm talent. So I think that if Drake May goes to Washington, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the Patriots take J.J. McCarthy or Jaden Daniels at that spot. I think that possibly Joe Alt could be that high, which changes the entire complexity of that top 7.
It's probably always going to be a quarterback that's the most projected guy, but it feels to me like based on what you're saying, Zach, McCarthy is the most projected guy in this. Like, I agree with you. It's all about his mentality and his mindset and his personality and his leadership. But in terms of what he was asked to do at Michigan, what he needed to do at Michigan, what he was surrounded by at Michigan, that he's the biggest guy in this draft in terms of projecting the actual football. And I guess that's probably always going to be a quarterback in a draft. But do we agree? Do we have a consensus here that in this draft, he's the most projected guy? And people are comfortable maybe projecting him because they love all this other stuff. So they're like, we don't have to worry a bit about any of this other stuff. So if we like his arm enough, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If we like his feet enough, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's going to be super coachable. And so that's why I see bust potential in him, because you're wowed by all of the other stuff that you want in your quarterback room. He's going to be the first guy in, the last guy out, all of that stuff that you want. And if you're a quarterback desperate enough or craving enough, you'll take him, and you almost overlook some of the things that most people are always looking for in the quarterback. The physical
attribute. Isn't he a little like Mac Jones? Don't you guys kind of get a little feeling of Mac Jones to his game? Like, he doesn't have that great of I mean, it's a good enough arm for the NFL, but I feel like there's just a lot of, if you're the Patriots, do you really want a guy that kind of screams Mac Jones to you?
But Mac Jones had the production. Mac Jones had massive production at Alabama. And I do feel like McCarthy is kind of, I do think there's a lot of projection there. I mean, it feels a little Travon Walker-esque. It's a different projection because it's not the physical thing that he's got. It's the leadership and the intangible thing. But Travon Walker was all projection, and it got him to the first pick. And I would love to see what the actual hit rate is on guys that are like that. That would be a good topic to research at some point during the offseason. But I do think McCarthy, because he doesn't have the production. Yeah, he did win, but I don't believe in the whole winning is a QB stat thing. So it's a lot of interesting fuzzy math with him that I think is pushing him up the board here.
Everybody out there, go ahead and retweet. Let people know this is going on. If you're listening later, please subscribe, like, rate, review, do all that stuff to help all of us out. We appreciate it. So I want to go back to the idea that maybe something at the top throws off the routine projections. The other routine projection here is that the team coming up for the quarterback automatically goes to Arizona, the first team not taking a quarterback. And Monty Ossenfort has shown in very short amount of time that he's willing and able to construct trades. But what if Arizona stays there to take Harrison or whoever they feel like helps them out the most? Is it a guarantee? It doesn't seem to me like it's a guarantee that Arizona is the team that trades. And so what if you get to 5 or to 6 or to 7? Obviously, that would really benefit the Titans if somebody waited until 7 to make their quarterback move. What do we think the likelihood is that the quarterback trade doesn't happen till 5, 6, 7 instead of happening right at 4, which is what everybody's penciling in their mock?
I think it's kind of likely the Vikings don't trade at all. I mean, they're at 11, right? So are you really going to trade as the 11th overall pick and the 23rd overall pick for the 4th best quarterback, theoretically, if the first 3 quarterbacks go? I don't know if they do. And I think
the Raiders, are they scared of the Raiders? That's
right. Like, the Raiders don't have a lot of ammo to move up to 4. Neither does really Denver. I mean, you can
Denver definitely does.
Yeah, I think New Orleans is a little weak to be able to move up to that spot. I mean, I think the likelihood of any team moving up to 4 or even 5, because it's so expensive, is Vikings and nobody else. And then you have to hope that that they really like the quarterback 4 enough to trade all these picks when they have Sam Darnold. And if they don't trade up, the next quarterback, you could maybe trade up with the Falcons and probably get your quarterback 4 at half the cost that it would take for you to trade up 4 or 5. I think that the automatic conclusion that the Vikings are 100% sure trading up is a little bit too heavy-handed for me. And I feel like what they have done is given them the option, if someone were to fall past the Patriots that they weren't expecting to be there, then they would trade up. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that's automatic that they're going to trade up at 4 or even 5.
Yeah, my guess is, I mean, because there is the thing that there's not really. I think the Giants are kind of the stalking horse for them, because you could see them go quarterback at 6 if they had a guy that really kind of fell in their lap there. So I think they will certainly have an offer on the table to Arizona and to the Chargers. I think probably pre-draft that'll already be kind of outlined and discussed, that if our guy is there, but I'm not sure that they're going to just say if any of the guys are there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, they're probably going to have some preference, obviously, between May or McCarthy or even Daniels if he were to kind of surprisingly fall. I think those guys are going to be. It's going to depend on who's there, and then who is willing to say yes to whatever the Vikings are offering. Because I do think they want to move up, and I do think, it's their job to know who this is. But whoever the Giants like, you probably better get in front of the Giants if that's somebody that New York actually has interest in. So
let's say there's a quarterback trade made ahead of the Titans. Who's somebody going to love enough to come up to 7 with the Titans? I mean, I know that this is a total crapshoot, and you never know. We've seen trades up into the top 10 for players that we never expected. New Orleans has come up there for a pass rusher that none of us thought was a top 10.
Horrible trade,
right?
Yeah, disaster.
But we see trades like that all the time. But who are we thinking? Like, I look at that and I think, well, first off, the 2 guys that they're going to come up for are 2 guys that we think the Titans would be eminently interested in. Neighbors, if he's surviving, or Alt as the top left tackle. The Titans have to not be in love with one of those 2 guys in order to deal out of 7 and be passing on one of them. Or is there somebody else we think is a shiny object for somebody? You guys have any inkling that somebody could love somebody to come to 7 there? Or is that we just sit back and hope that somebody is in love in a scenario like we're talking about there, where New Orleans surprised everybody? What was that, 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
I think the scenario that makes the most sense is someone really wants the wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2, whatever's available. Specifically, I think the Chicago Bears makes a lot of sense. But I also wouldn't put it past people like teams with pretty much built rosters trading up and trying to get Brock Bowers before the Jets get him. And that seems to be a big connection right there. Even though I'm a little I got a little conspiracy theory that I think that the Jets are a sneaky quarterback team depending on who falls, because Aaron Rodgers only has this year and next year left on contract. And you may want to go ahead and get your succession plan in place in the first round and have a 5th-year option on a guy.
He's always
long-range planning for the Jets. You're giving the Jets way too much credit for long-range planning.
And Aaron Rodgers has always reacted so well to teams drafting quarterbacks that he's on.
Hey, bring in a guy. I'll counsel him. I'll put him under my wing. I'll think about the team's long-range future. That's how I operate.
I'll take him to his dark. I'll take him to the dark room with me. We'll do ayahuasca together. Yeah, it'll be a great time.
Yeah,
but I can see someone trading up for Brock Bowers, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, Dallas Turner or Quinion Mitchell, because those guys are all connected to the Jets, the Falcons, in some form or fashion have been connected to those 2 teams. So I could see a team trading up for those guys and a team not wanting to miss out on a wide receiver, because technically the Falcons and the Jets could both draft a wide receiver as well if they like Brock Bowers. Why not like a wide receiver? But I also think that there was a lot of rumblings since the combine about Michael Penix and the Raiders. And you got Denver, New Orleans, and Las Vegas all in a cluster, all in need of a quarterback of the future. And if Bo Nix or Michael Penix is there, you're kind of going to have a little bidding war to try and jump up, whether it's Denver wanting to keep them behind them, New Orleans trying to jump a divisional rival, or even New Orleans just trying to jump both of them. I mean, there are scenarios. I just don't know how likely the scenarios are, but I do think there are scenarios and players that are worth trading up for certain teams in certain situations.
Do you guys stay put at 7 for anybody if you get a reasonable trade down? Would you stay for – I'd think about staying for Neighbors, but otherwise I'm trading down. Where are you?
That's where I am too. I think Neighbors to me like is a big enough talent that I think you almost have to take him if he's there. Assuming they're comfortable with the personality and all the other stuff that has come out or been reported about him. But assuming he's there, I think he's talented enough to make me stick and pick. But otherwise, I would be trying to trade down. And I do love Joe Alt, as I've said many times now in many arenas. But I just don't think the separation between Alt and Fashanu or Alt and Latham is enough to make me not want to pick up the extra second or third round pick that I could get from moving back 2 or 3 spots and still getting a top tackle. So, yeah, I think Neighbors is the one guy that sticks out to me. Or there's still a crazy scenario. I do think that like Marvin Harrison somehow does trickle down there if the 4 quarterbacks go, and if some team likes Neighbors better or some team likes Adunze better. I don't think it's completely crazy for a team to be like head over heels for Adunze. I could see Harrison also being an answer for that too.
What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, it'd be really hard for me to turn. I'm always team trade back. Like every draft, I may not start out that way, but as we get closer and closer to the draft, I'm always team trade back. And I agree with Mike. I think the team goes Alt, trade back, and Neighbors currently. Like if they can't trade back, they'll settle for Neighbors if Alt is not there. And so I don't think they trade back for Alt unless someone blows them away with a great trade offer. And I would get the sense that it would still have to be a pretty good trade offer for them to move away from Neighbors. But I do think there's some options there. But I'm kind of with Mike, and the whole scenario is like, there's not, for me personally, there's not a prospect that I wouldn't trade out of 7-4, because even if it's Marvin Harrison Jr., you're probably going to get a really good haul for someone that wants to trade up for Marvin Harrison Jr. So again, it's dependent upon what the trade offer is, but I don't think there's any player in this draft that I'm not willing to, if the offer is good enough, to trade back and get more picks, especially in this draft.
You mentioned Bowers. I tried very hard to put into context on Twitter what Brian Callahan said about tight ends yesterday. I asked him, and this is funny because the Titans have so many needs. Just yesterday, we got around to asking about defensive line and tight ends. Now, they have 3 tight ends on the roster in Chig, in Josh Wiley, and in Thomas
Odukoya.
Yeah, and he hasn't played, right? He's been 2 years as an international practice squad.
Well, everybody's ready to give him a starting role. I don't know if it's like that in your replies,
Right.
but everybody's like, Thomas Odukoya, he's fantastic.
Right, and that's why Odukoya, I didn't mention his name. I put it out there and wanted to see if Callahan would mention his name, and he did not. And Callahan is not mentioning the name of peripheral guys. He's mentioning the name generally, though he mentioned Mason Kinsey, but he's mentioning the name of primary guys, generally speaking. And he's not mentioning the name of peripheral guys. He's mentioned the name of primary guys. So I asked him about the state of tight end, and he said, we need tight ends. He talked about having 3, needing 6 for camp, etc. People wanted to take that and say, oh, he's putting it out there that Bowers is in play. That is not, I don't think by any means what he was doing. I think we all agree there are just positions that are more important that this team needs to address, ideally with 3 picks in the first 2 nights, in that being, and we've just discussing them here, left tackle, edge, receiver, that are more dynamic, important positions to a football team. And while they need tight ends, while you'd like to put somebody on top of Chig and bump everybody down, they probably don't have the luxury of doing that. And they're talking about adding a 3rd guy that can be a better Kevin Rader, minimize what you're asking of Odukoya if you're asking anything of him, and get some camp bodies that maybe, somebody rises up and could be a good practice squad guy that can maybe shift up. You have a tight end that you like here in 4, 5, 6 that you think could be a solid roster guy?
I mean, I like Tip Ryman and Jaheim Bell for different reasons. They're not guys that I would pick in the 4th round or anything. but they're guys that provide you some versatility and flexibility. Brevin Spanford's another guy. He's just he's big. He's massive. But they're guys that if they're there in the 6th or 7th, I'm like, okay, well, I'll draft those guys. But if they're 4th and 5th is still at this point with this team and its roster is a little too rich for a tight end at this point. Because I think there's better depth elsewhere or better players that could fit a bigger need than what the tight end will eventually be. Because the tight end that you're going to draft in those rounds is just going to be what Josh Whyle was last year, right? A guy that maybe could contribute, that you have to filter in through the process, and he has to kind of earn his way into a backup role. And it's just not something that's really high on my priority list in this draft. It's more of a, how does the board fall in the 6th or 7th round, whether I'm entertaining taking a tight end.
You were nodding, Mike. You like those two guys?
I like Ryman a lot. Tip Ryman from Illinois. I mean, he's like 6'5", 270, really, really good blocker, and also tested really well athletically, which I believe very strongly in the idea that you cannot take unathletic tight ends. They just don't work in the league. The only guys that hit are the guys that are the freak athletes, and Ryman, I wouldn't say he's quite freakish. I think Theo Johnson falls into the freak athlete category, and I would be comfortable with him sometime early on day 3, potentially. Also think Ben Sinnott is a guy that I like a lot from Kansas State, who, he may end up sneaking into the 2nd or 3rd round, honestly. So I'm not sure if he'd be in the range where I'd really want to grab him. But there are some tight ends that I like in the draft. But Ryman, to me, is a guy that makes a ton of sense for this team because of how he pairs with both Chig and Wiley's skill sets. He kind of brings another element to that room, and I think all 3 of those guys fit well together moving forward, and all kind of bring something different to the table. So I think Ryman is like a 5th or 6th would be a home run pick.
Yeah, and again, with how the board falls, they have so many needs. Guy like that could fall in their lap and be a very good pick, or there could be 3 other positions that are more valuable to them. I'm going to circle back here just to Ed Henry. He says, "Don't kill me for asking, but is it fair for me to criticize the local media? Say me, I'm the one raising this, for overanalyzing every player Callahan doesn't mention that somehow now lost a spot on the team." I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I like the fact that he's not fluffing up perimeter players as if they're solutions to things. Odakoya had a great camp last year, never broke the bubble. They would have had to have sacrificed a practice squad slot to get him on because he was an exemption. A lot of us thought, hey, you're suffering at tight end. Why not get this guy up? Vrabel didn't believe in him to that degree. And I like that Brian Callahan's not including him and saying, we've got 3 tight ends and including this guy. He's leaving him in the basket of, somebody that I've got to see on the field and's got to prove something to me before I'm going to start mentioning him as a 53 guy. Right now he's a 90 guy, and we need some tight ends. I like that. I don't want you to mention a bunch of fringe players as if they're solutions. I like you leaving Burks out of the mix right now in a lot of ways, because I think Burks is a gravy guy who should be left out of the mix until he shows you some kind of regular production, participation, non-injury, all of that stuff. Don't list for me guys who are not dependable and unproven. I like what Callahan's doing in that regard. You guys are both nodding. I take it you agree with that thinking. Let's go on to some more meat here. What's something you absolutely don't want to unfold for the Titans in the first 2 rounds? I'll go here. I know Zach's big on Faga. I don't, and your write-up on him was excellent. You like his meanness and what he can do to beat people up. I'm concerned with his lateral ability, and I think left tackle, I think a lot about Taylor Lewan coming out. I know he didn't always pan out, but his athleticism and ability to get out was so unusual. There's nobody in this draft that matches that, but that's kind of my left tackle idea. And I look at this guy and see so little of that. I kind of fear him as a left tackle option because of that. So he's somebody I don't want for that reason. That's my guy.
Yeah.
Who are you afraid of?
I think I'm afraid, like, as far as the scenario goes, like, I'm a little afraid that if Alt, Neighbors, Odunze, and MH and Marvin Harrison Jr. are like all gone and no one wants to trade up, I'm not calling it a disaster. If their hand is forced to draft OT2 or Dallas Turner, it makes it harder in terms of roster building if you have to settle and can't trade back. But I'm with you. I think the guys that scare me the most that to transition to left tackle are Faga, even though I really like Faga, and I like if Bill Callahan likes Faga, I like Faga even
Sure.
more. And then Tyler Guyton is a guy that kind of scares me too, because I like the Faga thing is also compounded by the fact that if you put him next to Skoronski, that's a side of your offensive line that really lacks some length. And that's dangerous, and that's why also you see that Faga has all these false starts, and because he does lack a little bit of length, and he's trying to gain any kind of advantage that he has. Now, what Bill Callahan can do with that, I have more faith in what he could do with Faga than I do with Tyler Guyton. But I will say I'm kind of cooling on Tyler Guyton as far as I really did not like him, but I kind of like the idea. I think he's going to fall into the second round. And if you go Malik Neighbors and Tyler Guyton, you could do a lot worse in the first and second round. And what's interesting about Guyton is that he's very green, but he's very durable and reliable. He started out as a quarterback and running back in high school and transitioned into a right tackle. And he was protecting the blind side of the Oklahoma quarterback who's left-handed. So in that kind of sense, they trusted him to protect the blind side of the quarterback. So there's a lot of trust there from Oklahoma. He's in a good system that probably translates to what Bill Callahan is used to coaching. And he has the athleticism. It's just the technique, the experience going from right tackle to left tackle is kind of a little scary. But again, a guy like in the second round, I'm not too worried about. In a trade back, I'm really shooting for Olu Fashanu and JC Latham. Like that's where I'm shooting for in a trade back scenario.
Mike, what scares you?
I'm in the same boat as far as that trade back target there, but I think my fear would be is if they went with an edge rusher. If they went Dallas Turner, because I don't even think Dallas Turner's the best edge rusher in this class. I think he might be the safest. But I like Latu a lot more, just from a skill set standpoint. And I think it would be a mistake to go edge at that high in this draft. Maybe if they traded way back, I could maybe be more comfortable with that.
Way back, late teens?
Yeah, like late teens. That's about the range where, and even then, I would really prefer them to get Latu and not Turner or Verse. I'm hot and cold on Verse a little bit, but Latu to me is really the gem of that group. And I just don't think it's a great edge class overall. So I think they'd be reaching for one of these guys if they were taking them in the top 10. So that's probably my biggest fear is that they end up going edge, despite the fact that I think they need an edge. So it's just not the best class to grab one. I don't think
it's just a delicate balance of roster building in this draft without the picks that they lacking the picks that they have.
We talked about Faga there and lateral movement. The one guy that stood out to me at the combine, and I admit I was back from Indianapolis. I was sitting on my couch watching offensive line drills, and I can't get it out of my head the way Troy Fanu moved. Especially amongst his group, I thought his lateral movement, he just looked like one of the smoothest guys to me. He hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and I think Dane Brugler even lists him among guards. But Mike, you listed him in the piece you wrote this week in tier 2, I believe. Mm-hmm. You tiered left tackle options first, second, and third tier. So you like him. What's the upside and downside if he somehow wound up the Titans' left tackle pick?
It's his case is fascinating because I think the entire reason he got lumped into the guard discussion initially was because he's like 6'3" and some change. Like he's short for a tackle, but he's not short where it matters, which is his arm length. He's got 34.5-inch arms, which is above average length. So he's a long player. And like you said, he's got excellent movement skills, really good athlete, really good in space, has the nasty demeanor. I think he's got some technique stuff to clean up for sure. Some of the pressure numbers and stuff like that are not great on him. But I think part of that is he was in an offense that passed the ball a ton. So you always got to look at how many pass blocking snaps did they have, not just how many pressures did they give up. Because some of these guys faced, like over the last 2 years, 1,200. I think Fanu had 1,200 pass blocking snaps. Some of these other guys only had 700. So like literally twice the number of times he was asked to do that part of the game. So I like Fanu a lot. I think he would be able to step in and play right away as a day one starter at left tackle, and I think he's got some long-term upside. I think he just looks weird as a tackle. He's just short, and when you line him up, he does look like a guard, but to me he plays like a tackle, so that's what counts. And I'd be more than happy with him after a small trade back. I wouldn't take him at 7.
Yeah.
But after a trade back into that like 10 to maybe 16 to 18 range, I'd be perfectly happy with Fanu as an option in there.
What do you think of him, Zach?
I like him. I've liked him from the offset on the outset of this offseason. I look at him from the fact that, I watched a lot of Washington play, football in 2023. They were a fun team to watch. I just thought he was nasty. He's a feisty guy. He's going to make sure that he's going to drive you into the dirt every chance he gets. And I am with Mike. What you heard about the whole guard thing was because he was everybody said he was small. And I was thinking that meant his arm length, because you couldn't find anywhere where his arm length was listed. And I was like, man, his arms don't look that small and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out he has 34-inch arms and he's got a good wingspan. He's got the athleticism. If I'm a team drafting Titans or whoever, drafting Troy Fautanu, and you're not giving him a shot at tackle, you're crazy. If you're only drafting him to be a guard, like Dane Brugler has alluded to into his beast, and a couple other guys have done it too, put him as guard, I think you're crazy. I think he's the 5th best. He'd be my borderline 4th or 5th best tackle in this class. And I think that he's got a lot to give. And listen, maybe he's not a left tackle, but maybe he's a right tackle. But I think he's a tackle in the NFL. And like Mike said, if you draft, maybe if you trade back to the mid to late teens and you land Troy Fautanu, again, I think that's a good path to take, because you're obviously going to pick up other draft picks for the future and in this draft in that scenario, and you're getting a guy that can play tackle. I'm convinced.
Word about our sponsor, Zen Sports. Go download the app if you are in Tennessee. Great place to bet. If you download Zen Sports and use the code TNPAUL, TNPAUL, bet as little as $10, and you get a free year's membership to paulkuharsky.com, where you can read everything that I write. You can read Mike here on Wednesdays. You can read Zach right now on Thursdays, and free year of that. What could go wrong? Blake Bedingfield also contributing to the site. That's a heck of a lineup right there, all for making a $10 bet at Zen Sports. But you want to make a bigger bet than that, because they've got a no danger first wager deal going on for you. So you bet $1,000, you hit on that, and your betting account is set for a long, long time. You miss, within 24 hours, they refund you, and you forget you ever made that bet, and just move along with your life. It's a great deal from Zen Sports, which has been great to me. They'll be great to you. Check it out. Go download the app if you're in Tennessee, Zen Sports. Use the code TNPAUL and get going on that. Lots to bet right now. Masters starting today, obviously. NBA, NHL, EPL, if you're looking at that like I and a lot of people are after FanFest in Nashville. Got a lot of people fired up. Check it out. I appreciate your interest in them. We mentioned The Beast by Dane Brugler, which came out yesterday, and I know you guys dove into that like I did. One of the things that struck me And I go right to the bold print, on the first pass, the kind of his verdict on a guy. Looked at the offensive lineman, and it's a great tackle class, obviously, but the verdict statement on these offensive linemen is not that strong for very long. Even the Joe Alt write-up, it kind of disappointing if you want to be excited about Joe Alt and Fanu, and they drop off quickly into not ideal guys. Positives, things to look forward to about them. But that was my big takeaway. Joe Rexroad was giving me a problem. He's so nervous about the Athletic kid. Like, I'm giving away the house. This thing's an 800-page document or whatever it is. I read 4 sentences and he's getting nervous that I'm losing them subscriptions. I'm wondering, for each of you, we'll start with Mike on this one, what maybe on your first perusal of the Beast was something that caught your attention or surprised you from Brugler?
Yeah, I think some of the things that jumped out to me were some of his specific rankings for certain guys. Like, I've been looking a lot more at inside linebackers since the Titans really pretty clearly are going to draft one, it seems. And Trevin Wallace being his third inside linebacker above guys like I think he was above Edgerrin Cooper for him, Peyton Wilson. So it's or I might have had that flip, but one of those two guys he was ahead of. And that one was kind of eye-catching to me. I'm not the hugest Trevin Wallace fan. I'm interested in him, but that was a little bit of a surprise. And then him having Tavondre Sweat as like a 4th-round player, which I think is incredibly low for Sweat, even with the recent DUI and everything like that. Just kind of surprising to me. Those were two of the things that jumped out initially.
Zach wrote highly about Sweat at Stacking the Inbox, and about how people are making a mistake if they think he's just a 2-down player just because of his size, that it amounts to body shaming, if you will. That was a really good piece. Your thoughts on Brugler and what you took from that?
The Sweat thing really stood out, but I think what stood out to me the most, and they talked about it on the Athletic Football Show, was Andrew Phillips over Kamari Lassiter was surprising. Now, Andrew Phillips is a smaller defensive back, a cornerback from Kentucky, and he had kind of an up and down Senior Bowl week. But the fact that he's higher than Kamari Lassiter inside the top 10 in a second-round pick was super surprising. But Nate Tice also agrees that this is a guy that there's some people that say that he could sneak into the first round. I don't know. I don't know why, but he must be killing it in some interviews or something. But I found that surprising. I agree with Trevin Wallace as linebacker 3. I thought Jaden Hicks and Javon Bullard over Tyler Nubin at safety, when Tyler Nubin is, to me, the clear number 1 safety, and there was a huge drop-off between the next of them. Marshawn Nealon in his top 32, sneaking up boards. And I thought that was really weird that Christian Mahogany, one of the best interior offensive linemen in this class, was all the way down in 99th overalls, barely got into the top 100. And he's got some of the best, most fun tape in the interior offensive line class. I'm not surprised that he agrees with me that Malik Washington should be a lot higher on everybody's board, because Malik Washington is a pound the table for kind of guy for me in this draft.
I talk to Dane every year at the Combine for a little bit of this podcast, and I asked him for a corner. This is well before L'Jarius Sneed became a reality and before free agency opened, and I asked him for a corner for the Titans, and he started to say Andrew Phillips, but then he said, no, they've got Roger McCreary, and he backed off of that. But Phillips has risen substantially for him since then. Top 4 rounds. What's the most that we can expect? The Titans' record, I was looking back today. I mean, Amani Hooker, great 4th-round pick. But then you look at guys like Des Fitzpatrick, who was a trade-up and an absolute bomb. Rashad Weaver, who's the kind of guy we're talking about that they're not talking about, who needs to show a lot more. But you go back, I mean, they had a position where they did well there, or 4th round and later. David Long and Jayon Brown, they were finding inside linebackers in that position. You go back to 2016, Tajay Sharp, LaShawn Sims, contributors. You got something out of those guys. Daquan Jones, all the way back in 2014, solid starter for you for a long time. Cody Sensible in 2012 gave you something. Carl Klug in 2011, a nice contributor. I mean, I'm going back a long way there to find guys 4th round and later who did stuff for this team. What's the level of talent that we should expect the Titans to find at least semi-regularly 4th round and beyond? And how much better do they need to do there to flesh out their roster, where the depth is horrific?
They're going to have to find a linebacker at some point, and it feels like 4th round is that. So you're asking a lot. So for me, like
that spot, I feel like, I mean, it's a new regime, but that's a spot where they were progressing. They went too high with Monty Rice. They didn't need to go to 3rd round. They were doing fine in 4th and 5th.
Yep. Like, to me, like a 4th, your realistic expectations are with the Titans or with NFL draft prospects in general in the 4th through 7th round are conflicting with how the Titans have to build the roster and fill out the roster. Because really in the 4th round, you want like a rotational contributor that is going to be at some point over your rookie contract. The 5th round is like a backup and special teams contributor who makes the team and is kind of back there. Same with 6th and 7th. And what the problem is, the Titans are so lacking in talent and have so many sizable, visible holes that they're going to have to ask a 4th or 5th round draft prospect to likely come in and contribute right away. But this is kind of a good draft class to say that. I think the NIL stuff that you've been hearing from Jim Nagy and others really affects more the 6th and 7th round, not necessarily the 4th and 5th round. But this is why you should want to trade back, because if you're really eyeing a linebacker like Junior Colson, which makes all the sense in the world for this team, he's a perfect fit for this Tennessee Titans team.
And Zach's got a piece that
but it's too rich for 38
on Junior Colson today at paulkuharsky.com.
Yeah, paulkuharsky.com. I talk about him, Jordan McGee, and Edifon Ulofoshio. How
long did you work on that pronunciation?
Yeah, actually, I can get it on the first try. It's the first one that gives me more problems than the last name for whatever reason. Probably all the vowels. But I look at it and I go, they're going to have, if they want Junior Colson and they can't trade back at any point, 1st or 2nd round, it's going to be a reach to draft him at 38, but I almost think that's better to draft him at 38 than to draft maybe Edifon Ulofoshio in the 5th or 6th round, because I think that he's a level above that player. But it's tough. Like this 5th, and they're going to be asking a lot from this 4th and 5th round, and they're going to be asking Frank Bush to do a lot, which everybody touts that he is some great developer of young talent, and I don't know of a young linebacker that he has developed. I can't find one. Anyone can point him out to me.
He didn't do much on Munchak's staff. He did not strike me as a special coach as part of that staff.
And a lot of linebackers got worse when he became that team's position coach. I went back and looked at it and wrote about it for stackingtheinbox.com. It may have been for one of the paulkuharsky.com pieces. But I failed. He may be a great coach, may be a great teacher, but I have not seen the development aspect from Frank Bush at any of his stops.
Denard Wilson really emphasized player development in his press conference with us yesterday. I thought if you wanted to get excited about something they said yesterday, him really almost like getting up on the table and saying, we are here to develop players. I thought that was the thing to get the most excited about, after a lack of player development for far too many guys with Vrabel, particularly Vrabel and his staff, particularly later on in their regime. Where the guys they could point to were, far lesser guys who developed from, nothing to a little bit of something, but it wasn't the premier guys that you wanted to see. Yeah, NWI developed into a guy who's a serviceable 5th wide receiver who kept winding up being the 3rd or the 2nd wide receiver.
He's bad luck. He doesn't need to be on this team. He's bad luck. He's going to find, if he stays on this team in the final 53, I'm convinced he curses and sucks the life force out of every other wide receiver, and he will find meaningful snaps somehow.
I absolutely agree. Like, I don't think you could not have him because of what they don't have, but he's going to find his way on the field too much. And it's
Mike's like Joe. He has NWI as wide receiver too.
No, I like NWI because I think he's a really good like 4th or 5th wide receiver. I agree that they somehow need to quit letting him rise up the ranks. But I think he's really good. That I think it's better that they have him than that they don't. Because if you had to play Colton Dowell last year, Colton Dowell was not giving you what NWI gave you last year. In the snaps that he did end up taking, which thank God he was here because Treylon Burks completely fell apart for you. So you had to have somebody take those snaps. At least he was somewhat productive with them.
Let's take a couple questions from people who are kind enough to join us today. Daniel says Callahan said he wanted bigger offensive linemen with strength and power. I don't know if he said he wanted them. He said he likes them. He likes to look good getting off the bus. Latham and Mims make the most sense if that's what they're looking for. They raved about Sadiq Charles' strength and size already. I don't know if they raved about it. They said they like it.
That seems like a little bit over exaggeration there.
Yeah, that's part of the appeal of Sadiq Charles, right? When he's at his best, he's got that size and strength and size. What did you make, you two, of what Callahan said about? I mean, I think every coach is going to say, all things being equal, he likes bigger, stronger guys. And it's a question of what his dad can make of those bigger and stronger guys. But like we said, if they like the kid from Washington who happens to be 6'3" and can make something of him, I don't think this dismisses him as a possibility. It's just not an area he scores particularly high in.
Yeah, find me an offensive line coach that doesn't want bigger.
But I want a small guy.
Yeah, I want small guys that can't push the defender across from them and have no power. They can only do like 10 bench reps.
Right. The question is, do you want Mims, who's got very limited experience but all the size in the world? Where's the line there? You're talking about.
I guess it depends on how good Zach Woodfin is, right? Like him and his team and the strength and conditioning coach, the medical staff, and all that stuff. Mike loves Amarius Mims. He scares me to death. He scares me so much.
Well, I want a guy that's coming in and playing on day one. I mean, I stood next to Mims. I stand next to a lot of these guys, so I've become a little bit immune to being awed by bigness. I was a lot younger when I stood next to Javon Curse and was awed by bigness, but it's hard not to be awed by Mims. But you look at how little he played compared to Fontenot, who we talked about, how much he's played. I mean, how do you balance that thing out there in terms of especially, immediate impact? It's hard not to say you'd get more out of Washington than you'd get out of the kid that played at Washington than you get out of somebody that was waiting in line at Georgia.
Yeah, and I do think Mims, though, I think he's more polished than you would think for a guy who played so little. Like, I think he shows that he's got some ability, both to mentally pick up, stunts, twists, things like that, and also just with his technique usage. I think he could play right away if you brought him in here. I like him a lot. I know I'm higher on him the most just because there is some, like, I acknowledge there's risk involved with, he had the ankle injury and then came back, I think maybe a little bit too quick from that, or tried to, and then the hamstring injury, which actually is an interesting thing that he suffered the hamstring at the combine. But there's a study, or there's been some people tracking this recently, that after the tightrope ankle surgery, that people are having hamstring injuries shortly after that, after they return, like almost every time, it feels like. And there's some sort of correlation there, people think. So I'd be interested to know more about that, or to see a bigger medical study on that. But either way, there's some risk involved with both injury and the small sample size, because he just didn't play very many games. He had 8 career starts. So there's some risk there. But, going back to the question of large versus small, I think, like you guys said, everyone, if you give me the choice, I'm going to take the large guy, all things being equal otherwise. But if you go back and look at Bill Callahan's, starting left tackles that he's had over the past 20 years, DeBrickashaw Ferguson, not an abnormally big guy, 6'6", 310. Tyrone Smith was 6'5", 320. Trent Williams, 6'5", 320. And Jedrick Wills was 6'5", 307. So none of those guys are like comically sized tackles. We're not talking about people in the Latham or Mims size range. We're talking about normal size tackles. So from that standpoint, like Olu is a guy that's that size. So I think, would they like a bigger guy? And if they think Latham or Mims have the movement skills, have the technique, have the ability, all that stuff to be able to be really good, then I think they certainly wouldn't shy away from taking a bigger guy, but they haven't had to have that in the past to have success at the left tackle position.
And real quick on this size thing, the big talk this week was Arif Hassan over at Wide Left. He talked about RAS and poked holes in how the RAS system works, calculates, and all this stuff. And Lance Zierlein popped into a discussion about it, and he goes, he doesn't know about the weighting, but he agrees on height. Being a 6'8" offensive tackle is not an advantage. And often being a 6'5" DT is a disadvantage. So this height, what's great about Joe Alt is that he has the height and the athleticism, right? So, and he's a very clean prospect. But just because you're a 6'8" offensive tackle does not mean you have some advantage over the guy that you line up across. You have to be able to have the athletic ability on it. So it's not, yes, it's bigger strength and power, but like you say, Troy Fanu, who is about 6'3", he's athletic, he's got strength and power, and he's got feistiness and an edge to him. He's a guy that still, just because he's not 6'7", doesn't mean that he can't be a bigger, stronger guy technically.
And to that point, Joe Alt he's almost 6'9", like he's 6'8" and 5'8", so he's an outlier in that regard.
It's got to be one of the tallest tackles out there.
Yeah, I think he's 98th percentile on mock draftable for height. But he has shorter arms than Troy Fatanu, who's 6'3". So to me, I don't know that the height it matters. People look at it and people are obsessed with it and think, oh God, he's just this mammoth guy. But I agree with Zierlein that sometimes when you're 6'9" and you're being asked to block a guy who's over here like vintage Von Miller and turning the corner about 3 feet off the ground, maybe that's not the advantage, that you don't necessarily want to be up that high. And I think that may contribute to some of the waist bending and stuff like that you see from Alt at times on tape, because he's got to find a way to get down there. It's a leverage game in the trenches, and being taller isn't always an advantage in that regard. So
let's take a couple more questions here. This is a popular one. John Kemper saying, has anyone's opinions evolved after the free agent acquisitions of the length of this rebuild, 2 years versus competing for division this year? I don't know that people – I'm a little bit surprised the degree to which people expected them to go slow. And I'm surprised how many people expected them not to spend. They had a lot of money. I didn't think they'd go spend, at certain positions where there was nothing. I knew they weren't going to go throw money to left tackle because there weren't left tackles. But when Calvin Ridley's there, I had a little bit of concerns. I've had people tell me, worry about Calvin Ridley with money. I think they did their homework on that, but that's something I'll be watching. But there's no reason for them, if they like Calvin Ridley, to not go get Calvin Ridley. Why wait? No matter who your quarterback is. If you have the money and the capacity, why are you slow playing your rebuild? There are teams that go from worst to first every year in the league, or there are teams that go from well out of the playoffs to wild card playoff appearances every year in the league. So I don't know if they're going to be one of those teams. Chad Brinker gave me great stuff when I asked about the expectations this year. He said, we're hopeful, but there's so much new stuff. You have no idea how long it takes to gel with an all new coaching staff and so many new players. So can it happen fast? Yeah. Might it take longer? Yeah. And that's a completely reasonable answer. And that's where I stand with it. I think Houston's going to be good. I think Houston's going to be the second most picked team in the AFC besides Kansas City, and reasonably so. Now, is their free agency going to be as good as everybody thinks? I think nobody's free agency is going to be as good as everybody thinks. Somebody's going to tear an ACL early, one of their guys, one of the Titans guys, somebody. and somebody's going to not play as well as expected. But are the Titans giving themselves every chance to get good fast? Yeah. Is their depth still going to suck? Absolutely. What do you guys think about the timetable?
I would agree.
It's a rebuild on the fly. I mean, that's what it is, and that's what most good team or formerly bad teams that are trying to be good do. They rebuild on the fly, and it's all about building around Will Levis. And the success of this season rides and dies with Will Levis. If he is terrible, this team will be middling to awful. If he's great, this team has a chance to make some noise, but likely, I mean, like first round wild card exit playoffs or something like that.
I agree.
Like, and that's fine. I think they have a wide range of outcomes, and I think that everybody needs to understand that. Of course, they were going to spend money. I was very surprised, like you were, Paul, about how much money they actually ended up spending a little bit and who they spent it on.
I thought that they would spend a lot.
I was a little surprised at I guess I wasn't really expecting them to be aggressive for Calvin Ridley. And I don't think they were initially expecting that either, but that's the point of a general manager, and the front office has multiple avenues, multiple strategies. If plan A fails, then we go over to this flow chart over here, and okay, now we need to go and attack this. Oh, this guy's still out there. We need to get that. So I was just kind of surprised. I guess I was more surprised that Calvin Ridley was actually still out there in that process for them to get him. I wasn't surprised they spent money on Lloyd Cushenberry in center. I wasn't surprised they didn't spend money on left tackle. Very surprised that they chose to spend money on Kenneth Murray at the outset of the linebacker free agency class. But I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised by how much better this team already looks, and I'm very excited, and I'm anticipating a pretty good draft. And I think this is going to kind of look like a pretty good team on paper that probably a lot of fans will fool themselves and buy into the hype a little too much. So I caution you, just relax and enjoy the season. This to me feels like a season where you could just sit back, relax, and either you're really great and you get to enjoy it, and if you're really bad, then you know that, and it's likely because of Will Levis, then you know that you don't have the quarterback of the future, but everything else around the next quarterback is built up really well.
I agree with that. I think people's expectations probably be too high. What do you think about the pacing, Mike?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of building a roster, I think maybe some people just put too much stock in the idea that like they're just not going to sign anyone. They're just going to be bad or tank. Like that doesn't really happen in the NFL. I think there's an urgency for them to find out what they've got in Will Levis, and I think the Ridley signing is a reflection of that they want to make sure that if Will Levis fails, it's not because he didn't have anybody that was open, right? That he didn't have no options to throw the ball to downfield. So I think that's a reflection on that. And also just, hey, this is a guy that fits our system. He's available. He's available at a price that we think is reasonable. Let's go get him. And whether Levis fails or not, you've got a guy for the next guy if that happens. So I think to some degree, we just shouldn't expect these to be like, it's not a 5-year plan, and none of these guys are under contract realistically for more than 2 years when they sign their deal. You sign a deal, it's a 4-year deal, but really it's a 2-year deal because the team could get out of it after 2 without any real major cap penalties. So all of this stuff is short term. All roster building is really short term, except for the draft, which I think is the long range, the long play of we want to invest in these positions so that in 3 to 4 years we have stars at these spots. And I think that's something that we have to look at. And I think as far as expectations go, I think I'm still kind of where I was last year with this team, that the depth is going to be so bad on this roster that I just don't think they're going to be able to be highly competitive. I think they could win 7-8 games and maybe hang around the playoff conversation, but I just don't expect this to be a playoff team this year, despite the additions, which I like. I think do move the needle, but I mean, we're still talking about they need starters at both tackle spots. They need a starter on the defensive line. They need a starter at linebacker. They need a starter at safety. There's still so many big holes on this team that are not going to all be filled in the draft. Even if they hit majorly in the draft, you're not going to get all of those holes plugged for 2024. You want to look at plugging those holes for 2025, 2026 right now.
Hey, a quick mention here. Zach and I have a deal for him to write through the draft, maybe a week after the draft. If you're enjoying Zach as much as I'm enjoying Zach at paulkuharsky.com, and you want to sponsor Zach at paulkuharsky.com, reach out to me or to Zach, and we can strike a deal and have him aboard once a week like we have Mike. That would be terrific for everybody involved. On the young talent thing out of the draft, I think too many people are looking at Calvin Ridley's addition. He's 29. He's saying he's younger than that because he was out for a year and a half with the suspension. Young talent is the reason the Titans need to draft a wide receiver in a great wide receiver draft. They're all going to be great wide receiver drafts, but a lot of people are saying they can wait. They shouldn't wait. They need a wide receiver out of this draft to be deep at wide receiver, to give Callahan a full stable to call everything that Callahan wants to call, and to have a young, growing wide receiver. So next year, if things don't work out with Hopkins, if Hopkins hits a wall, if you re-sign Hopkins, whatever, have a plethora of wide receivers. Get a young guy that grows in your system and is cheap for 4 years. And you can't have enough of that at certain positions. That's why they should draft a young corner as well, because they're great with the three corners. We all feel great about the three corners. One of those corners gets hurt, and Snead's got a knee issue, and they're talking about them defending the run where they're going to come up and deliver some hits. Odds are somebody's getting hurt somewhere along the way. And then you're to Trey Avery again. And then you're to Eric Garrar again. And the drop-off there is immense. So don't dismiss these positions, wide receiver, corner, where you think, oh, they don't need to draft a guy there. They absolutely need to draft a guy there, particularly receiver with the talent that's high. That's why if you're looking at Neighbors or Harrison and thinking, oh, they don't need that guy at 7, they absolutely could use that guy at 7. Agree?
They pretty much told you yesterday that that Neighbor, like they're looking for a slot guy, right? Neighbors starting out on this particular team would be the perfect slot guy for the Tennessee Titans. And then he's one of the few guys that can play in the slot and kick out next year. And to me, it's like, it just makes too much sense. We had someone in our chat yesterday when we were doing Football and Other Efforts, like, I'm really concerned I don't understand why they're looking at all these cornerbacks and bringing them in for 30 visits. They have brought in 4 so far. Well, it's because you need as many cornerbacks that are of high quality as you can for not only just in the NFL in general, but for the fact that it's Trey Avery and Eric Garrar right behind them. And like you said, like we've seen that story too many times. And with L'Jarius Sneed's knee concerns, with Cheeto's concerns and his injury history, and Roger McCreary not really being really good on the outside, you need a third outside guy, and I think that's what they're looking for out here. So I'm with you. Wide receiver, cornerback is fully in play, and that's why I'm really big proponent of the trade back, because if you can get a third rounder at some point, and maybe even an extra 4th or 5th, you're really cooking with gas to be able to fill holes not only now but for the future with good quality young players in a class that is deep at cornerback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, like those specific positions. And you need to, it's always good to buy when the surplus is there. And instead of waiting until you desperately need a wide receiver, which would happen next year, and not knowing really what that's going to look like for yourself and other teams, it's always good to buy it when you have tangible evidence in front of you.
That's the thing. And I think people have to get out of because so many people I've seen say stuff like, well, if they need a wide receiver, they can just draft one next year. Well, you're only getting so many starters out of any given draft, which is usually one. You're usually getting one first day one starter, if you're lucky, right? Like if you're drafting, pretty early in the first round, that guy's probably going to be your day one starter. But you're not getting multiple starters out of every draft for year one. And good teams don't rely on that. Good teams don't rely on, well, we need this guy to start right now, so we're going to draft him and plug this rookie in, because rookies usually suck. It's the rare exception where a rookie is actually like a high performer at his position. The good teams have guys that are drafted and waiting in the wings for that guy's contract to expire and move on, and then the Ravens don't re-sign that guy. They collect the comp picks, and the new guy is ready to go. He's in his third year. He's had some seasoning. He's gotten to play when the other guy was hurt at times, and now he's ready to step into a starting role. That's how these good teams build a sustainable operation, not by just, well, we're worried about that problem when it's a huge boiling red flag on the roster. You've got to build depth, and you've got to build depth at premium positions, which I view wide receiver and corner certainly as premium positions in the modern NFL.
We're so far removed from that in Nashville, Mike. It's a great point. People have forgotten about that. People have forgotten about that. People have forgotten about a situation where you look at the roster now and you draft considering who's a free agent next year or even 2 years out, and you plan that way. The Titans have not been in that position for so long that this fan base is utterly disconnected from that idea. And here's hoping that Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker and Anthony Robinson and Brian Callahan can bring this team back to a point where you actually think that way. And you'd head into the 2024 draft thinking about the 2026 roster. But we are not close to that right now. We're thinking about a twisted ankle. We're not thinking about it. We're thinking about 5 starting positions right now.
Yeah.
And then we're thinking about a twisted ankle and the damage it can do for 3 or 4 weeks. And it's been that way for far too long. And it's one of the reasons this franchise is in the position that it's in. We'll end on this. And I think it's a great question. Fred Black wants to know how you got Earl Campbell's autograph. Lean over or tilt and let us see. That's a Texas jersey. Mike is a University of Texas guy, and that is a heck of a piece of memorabilia. I'm not a big memorabilia guy, but if I were, that's a keeper.
So that was a gift from good friend Chris Alexander. So a shout out to Chris for a very thoughtful gift a while back.
Is that your number one thing?
I also have over here, I've got Bruce Matthews. I wish I'd gotten sprung for like a better jersey, but we actually, my brother used to play football with his son at Brentwood Blaze, and we caught him coming off a practice field and happened to have that jersey with us. And then I've got a Steve McNair. It's kind of way down there.
Now we lost his camera. What's your best piece of memorabilia, Zach?
Oh man!
And don't give me these Pokemon dolls or whatever the hell you have back there.
No Funkos. These are Funkos, but I have a signed Nick Saban Alabama football back here as well.
Yeah.
So that would probably be the biggest memorabilia. I have a D'Angelo Williams signed Miller High Life shirt. Speaking of like T'Vondre Sweat and his partying days, I went to University of Memphis, for those who may not know, and D'Angelo Williams was there at the same time I was, and he didn't come onto the fraternity house property, but he partied across the street. And I went
he
out.
Wouldn't dare come to your fraternity.
Well, I will say this: we were doing a joint party with one of the other fraternities there, and so him and his couple of guys that he was hanging out with was just like he didn't want to be mobbed and didn't want to have photos taken of him inside the party. So he stood outside. So I kind of had a Miller High Life shirt on. I asked him to sign it and drank a couple beers with him and stuff like that. So that's probably my favorite piece of memorabilia, but probably the most prized as far as expensive or worth something is going to be this Nick Saban football.
I don't know if you guys
I have a Chance Warmack cleat signed somewhere as well, but we know that's not worth anything.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know my Music City Miracle story, but a lot of photographers had they were taking pictures on the bench of dejected guys and stuff. There were not a lot of good pictures of Music City Miracle. And 4 months later, one of the Titans guys got 6 still shots of Dyson kind of already when he got towards the sideline. And we were allowed down on the sideline for the last 2 minutes of games at that early stage of things. And I was down there. And there's a picture of Dyson already that the lead blockers had let up and pulled behind him on the escort, and there's a V. So Dyson is here, and Greg Favors and maybe Perry Phoenix are here. And in that V, I'm in a jacket and tie like that. I was saying, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Everybody thinks I was rooting, but I'm kind of blurry in that V in the thing. And I slid it to somebody with the Titans, and they had, not knowing it was for me, but Wycheck, Dyson, and Neil all signed it.
No, that's amazing.
It's the only thing I have. It's in my
I forgot I
room
have this.
upstairs.
This is a signed Chuck Cecil flicking off of the rest from back in the day.
He signed it. What did he write?
It was given to my dad, but he passed it down to me. But Dad donated to the Baptist Children's Hospital or something, some charity that he was doing. And this is the picture that got sent to Dad. It's
funny that that's only the second most famous middle finger, or the third most, since you count Bud twice in the franchise's history. What other franchise has 3 famous middle fingers from, a 10 or 12 year period? Titans are probably unique in that regard.
Yeah. Running backs and middle fingers.
Mike Herndon, who you should be following, of course, on Twitter at Mike Herndon NFL. I've been typing it. There's a Mike Herndon out there, and occasionally I've been putting it wrong.
I've tried to contact him to get that handle from him, but he never responds. So.
Is he a legitimate Mike Herndon?
I think so. He did. I don't know if he deleted his Twitter and it's just still an active account or something out there. But
you should be following him. He puts too much good stuff on Twitter. He had one trade thing that was 16 tweets long. I told him, hey, we'll just offer that as a bonus post at paulkuharsky.com. And he said, all right, I'll think about that next time. Yeah. At F Words Pod, Zen Lyons screwed himself by not giving himself a real Twitter handle. But it's good.
This is actually, I took this over from Mike. Mike created this. It's still the same password that we had back in when we started the Twitter account.
What's that password?
I can't tell you what that password is, but it would be
I'll text it to you, DK.
This has been great. I appreciate both of you joining me. I appreciate the great content you help provide at paulkuharsky.com. If you're not a member out there, you're insane. This team is ridiculously good, and these guys are good all the time, but particularly the draft is not my strength. I know that, and that is why I'm leaning on people who are much better at it than I am. Appreciate you joining us. I'll send you out asking you to join the site, and don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks. See you again soon. Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.